Okay.
Pay a small account, it's really good.
All right, we are gonna call the Novi Board of Education regular meeting to order. It is October 6th. If we can please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I can get a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mr. Cook. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our first agenda item is awards, recognitions, and presentation. And tonight we have the honor of National Principal Month recognition. Mr. Menka.
Thank you. So October 2022 is recognized across the country as National Principals Month. And so the National Association of Secondary and Elementary School Principals recognize October as National Principals Month. And I have personally been extremely impressed with the principals that we have here. And for those people that may not quite really understand how difficult it is, if you think about it, you have the Board of Education and the central office administration that you're trying to keep happy. And then you have the parents that you're trying to keep happy, and the teachers in your building you're trying to keep happy. And your first and foremost responsibility is make sure that the students are taken care of. And so you have so many places that are competing oftentimes, pulling you in a variety of different directions. And I'm glad that we have this opportunity, because a lot of times our principals are not really recognized for the work that they do, and they do so many great things. So there's a resolution for the board to consider this evening, and be it resolved that the Novi Community School District Board of Education recognizes the month of October 2022 as National Principals Month, and honors the contribution of the Novi Community School District principals and assistant principals: David Asher from Novi Woods Elementary School, Ryan Francis from Deerfield Elementary, Jennifer Murphy from Parkview Elementary, Adva Ringel from Orchard Hills Elementary, Katie Dinkelman from Village Oaks Elementary, Lisa Fenchel from Novi Meadows Elementary, John Brickey from Novi Meadows Elementary, Rob Baker from Novi Middle School, Angie Southworth from Novi Middle School, Emily Polanski from Novi Virtual, Nicole Carter from Novi High School, Ron Kane from Novi High School, and Andrew Combe from Novi High School. And we are certainly very proud and honored to have these incredible educational leaders in our school district.
Thank you, Mr. Menka. If I can get a recommendation to support this resolution.
I would recommend that we support this resolution honoring our principals.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mr. Mena. Any comments or questions this evening? Mr. Cook, please.
Yeah, it was it was one of the elementary school principals at one time told me that, a lot of people don't understand how difficult it is. Be it that just two kids in the lunchroom, one could smash the other one's chips, and that turns into 6 hours worth of meetings. Trying to get the kids resolved, trying to get the parents, from being upset and everything. So it's not an easy task. It's definitely not an easy task. And we have some great principals here that are well worth their weight in gold and can handle situations hopefully worse than that. So, but they handle those in stride.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. I'd like to say all the work that they do, but it's so fun to watch them and to get glimpses of what they do. I know sometimes they maybe feel like they're not seen or they're not heard, but everybody in this community cares for them and are watching them. Today I saw on Twitter, Mrs. Dinkelman was at the ribbon cutting ceremony, and she was so excited, just like the kids. She had on her little green Novi shoes, and she had on her outfit, and she was just had this giant bright smile on her face. So we do hear you and we see you, and we appreciate all the work that you do for us here in Novi. Any other comments? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next, we have reports to the board. Tonight, we have the exciting non-homestead millage report. Mr. Meinkoff.
Thank you. I wanted to provide a report to the board and really for the community's sake as well, to understand a little bit about how funding is allocated to the schools and how our millages operate. One thing that I think is worth noting before I get into the presentation itself is this community has been extremely supportive of their schools and have been able to pass capital project bonds to allow us to keep our facilities at an extremely high caliber. But one of the things that some people might not know is that when you raise money for capital projects bond, those dollars cannot be used for operational expenditures. And so the opportunity to build things is one thing, but then we also have to make sure that we're maintaining them and operating them. And those obviously dollars come primarily from the state. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that works and how our schools are funded, and something that I think we have to think about as an opportunity in the not too distant future. So hope the presentation is up and I can kind of get into this a little bit. So Justin, if you're ready, can pull that presentation up. So essentially, there's really a few different ways that our schools are funded in terms of millages for operation. One of them that I want to talk about tonight is the non-homestead millage. And specifically, the non-homestead millage obviously is talking about properties that are not someone's principal residence. And this will hopefully shed a little bit of light onto an opportunity that I believe that we'll have here in the district. So when Proposal A was implemented in 1994, Proposal A essentially made it so that school districts could no longer raise taxes for their operating millages in the schools, and they essentially started to levy funding from the state to their local schools. When that happened, Novi was in a place because they had developed at a certain rate by 1994, where they actually had homestead taxes going towards their schools already at that time. And so Novi, like a handful of other districts, primarily in Oakland County, there's a few on the west side of the state, they actually they'd still take in some additional dollars towards their students from homestead millages. But that is actually going away slowly because as the state improves the pupil foundation allowance and tries to levy that across and balance that across the state so that everyone's getting the same allocation, they're kind of catching up. Because in Proposal A, Novi couldn't say levy additional taxes to support their schools, even if the taxpayer said we would like to. That's not something that's legal in the current proposal. So obviously we have homesteads, which are your primary residence where you live. And then we have the non-homestead places, which are businesses, rental properties, vacation homes. You are only allowed one principal residence exemption in the state of Michigan. So Novi does have a large amount of non-homestead properties. So if you think about the non-homestead millage, which is the purpose of tonight's discussion, every district in the state of Michigan can levy 18 mills for their non-homestead properties. And so this is something that the district can do. This is something that almost every district in Michigan does do, and we have done for a very long time. So the non-homestead property taxes are basically taken by the local municipality, by the business owners, and then sent directly to the state, sent directly to the school. So this is the one type of tax where the state is not in the middle. So this is a chart that is actually pulled the numbers from our 2021 dollars. So these are not as current. And the reason that I did that is because I had a really good calculation on exactly where these were from. But I could tell you that the new pupil foundation allowance across the state is $9,150. We're taking in roughly $9,450 because of those additional homestead taxes. But this particular funding formula, as seen right here, created a per pupil funding allowance made up of homestead taxes, state aid, and then in our case, an additional allocation of homestead millage on top. So if you see the graph there, the state aid there in the middle, we take in roughly $5,900 per student. The non-homestead taxes then represent that 2,700, and then we have this additional kind of $248 of homestead taxes that are levied. That's actually about $350 this year. So it's up to each school district to levy that 18 mills. So we have 18 mills of non-homestead taxes, and that's kind of the first taxes that come in the bucket. We get that first, remember, directly instead of it going to the state. And so as a result of that, in 21-22, that amount was $8,700 per pupil, and the state basically fills in whatever, balance is left. So one of the things that, this community has done, as I said, they do provide this additional amount of homestead taxes. So something that's really important to this whole conversation is that Richard Headley, which he penned back in the 70s, the Headley Amendment, which everyone's really excited by this history lesson, right? Just a
Love the
random
picture.
picture of Richard Headley,
There you
but figured we had to get a picture in there because he probably is just, his name's used, but you never see who he is.
Right.
So the Headley Amendment limits the property tax collections to a rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. So what that means is in a time when, property values are going up very quickly, as they are in Novi, they are going up very quickly and they're outpacing inflation. So what that means is no longer can you levy additional taxes beyond the 18 mills. So we are currently experiencing that, and so we are required to roll that back to the limit that the school is actually allowed to collect as a district. And so in the most basic terms, if I could describe it in a little bit of a different way, the Headley rollback has eroded our 18 mills. So we now are levying about 17.2 mills, and so our bucket is not completely full. So if you think about the district's finances and you look at, and again, I'm getting started here, but I'm trying to help point to a few things that could help. We're not currently levying what the state really tells us we should be levying, and we also haven't asked our voters to do so. And so if that bucket was full, we could get back to that 18 mills. And so right now, bottom line, this rollback equates to around $750,000 a year of revenue that we don't currently have. So this is an opportunity. The district has always been supportive, but I wanted to make sure that we're communicating to our taxpayers, to our families, to the board, how some of this works so that you can better understand why we may want to go back to this. So some potential courses of action and what most school districts in the state are doing as a result of this type of a situation. We could ask our voters to restore our non-homestead millage back to 18 mills with our, election in 2023. It could be a May ballot proposal. And in that scenario, we would essentially be restoring it back to what it was. It's not as though they're getting a large increase. It's really putting it back to what they had been paying before it had dropped off. And this is something that's also kind of an interesting concept and something that I have seen done successfully and personally in other districts where I've worked is you also can ask for what's called a Headley hedge. And what that means is that you're actually asking for the voters to approve something beyond the 18 mills, okay, as a cushion against further millage erosion. Now, just to be clear, remember that we stated that you're only allowed to levy 18 mills. So even if you said, well, we would like to levy up to the 20 mills, you're only going to be able to levy 18, but in the event of further property value escalation, you would not see such an erosion and have to go back out to the taxpayers all the time, right? It would allow for the district to essentially not have to keep asking the voters to do that. It would just stay at 18. And because the law requires that, the voters would have the confidence to know that they could only be levied at 18 mills. And they wouldn't go beyond that, but it would give the district a little bit of cushion so that they wouldn't have to continuously go back out. So the restoration of the non-homestead millage will allow us to continue to support our programs that we're known for. And as you know, this is just kind of an opportunity that I wanted to bring to your attention. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit early. I know we're in the process of going through our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations interviews, and they would obviously have a big role in this. This is probably a presentation they would normally do, but I think it's important to kind of put the conversation out there for you as a board to know about it, and give you an opportunity to think about how you might want to address this, you know, if you want to address this as we kind of move forward. So, questions?
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's been a long time since I took the finance class.
Yeah.
It's a good refresher.
Good.
Oh, question on this. Okay, so restore the 18 mills. Is that non-homestead or homestead?
Non-homestead.
Non-homestead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically businesses, rentals, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, vacation properties.
Right, I like that one, vacation properties in Novi. So if we did this, what does that equate? I mean, like, do we have a number like per business? Is it $200? Is it 500? Is it 5,000?
It's something that we could gather and collect, so we could run a calculator so you could see what that looks like. It's gonna look really similar to what they've been paying historically up until this year.
Okay.
So, this really just was eroded because the new, valuation reports came out and the property values in Novi are outpacing what Headley really allows the district to levy, which is why it fell behind the 18 mills. So, you know, we could do, if you decide as a board that you would like to pursue this, then we would run calculations and, you know, we would get other groups involved to run those projections. But this was kind of a precursor to that, so that you could understand, you know, kind of the challenge, because we're leaving about, you know, $750,000 to $800,000 a year on the table. So,
So this, excuse me, this does not impact, well, unless you're a business owner, or you have a rental property, or a vacation property.
correct.
It impacts businesses, rental properties, so it's not, I mean, there'll be a lot of people that this might impact that don't live in the city that wouldn't even be voting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
I guess my question is, granted, I haven't thought through all the pros and cons, but to me, it seems like it's a no-brainer. I guess my question is, for us as a board, or for Kathy as our finance chair, I don't know, or even you, Ben, I can't ask Mr. McIntyre. My presumption would be that our finance person would be crunching these numbers on an annual basis, and that there's no excuse why any year would go by where we didn't pursue this, much less the Headley hedge, so that we didn't have to seek a vote on it. But I would be ashamed as a board member to think that years have passed and we haven't been getting the $750,000 that would be so easy to collect, that would give us a few more FTEs, or maybe pay our teachers a better wage. So I don't need to really think about this one. I don't think any of us need to.
Well, I'm happy to move that discussion forward. The earliest way to address this would be in May, so that would be the next opportunity. But I wanted to get it out there so that you at least had that information, and then it gives us an opportunity to attack this as we get closer.
Just out of curiosity, if I may.
Yes, please.
Outside, so I know Oakland County we've got something on the ballot for transportation here in November. Do we know how that affects the same folks that are gonna be affected if we go forward with this?
That I don't have that analysis in front of me right now, but I could certainly get that information.
That and any other potential tax increases that may be coming outside of what we look at here.
Sure.
In Novi.
Yeah.
That one's Oakland County-wide, which would affect all businesses, I think,
Yeah,
here in Novi as well.
sure.
So, I mean, those are some of the ancillary things we have to think about as well.
Yeah, that is, it's less than a 1 mil increase. So I also would wonder, are there businesses that have been granted tax exempt status or something to the equivalent from the city that we wouldn't be able to collect that? I know that that's a tactic that's used. I would hope that it wouldn't include this, but again, that would be something I think would fall under the purvey of our finance person,
Yeah,
so. But yeah,
Absolutely.
it seems like a no-brainer.
And if I can, the other thing too is, you know, we don't know what the city has in mind. I know they're going through some new leadership there now, right? It'd be nice to just talk to them and find out what sort of plans they have that may have some impact here as well.
yeah, and that's part of why I wanted to bring it up now, because we have time to
Mm-hmm.
plan, we have time to prepare, and so we can get a lot of these answers. So that when you make the decision, if you make the decision to move forward, we'll be able to get some of these answers into your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so, because we had this in 2021, they've seen a decrease, correct? Those taxpayers have seen it fall off?
The non-homestead folks
Yes.
have a little bit,
Okay.
yeah.
But up until last year, they've been paying this?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for that information, and I think it's helpful as we move forward, and you'll bring that to the Finance Committee, I'm assuming, and then back to the board when the time comes to get it on the ballot, if that's the direction we're gonna go.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, we have our comments from the audience section of our agenda. Individuals who wish to address the board must identify themselves, their address, and any organization they may represent. The board and individual board members will not directly respond to comments or questions that arise during the public participation portion of the meeting. Individuals who wish to address the board shall direct their comments to the entire board and not to individual board members, the superintendent, other school district employees, or members of the audience. Behavior that is intemperate, abusive, defamatory, or discourteous, or that otherwise interferes with the orderly conduct and timely completion of this board meeting is strictly prohibited. We have green cards in the back. I saw a few float up here, so if you came in and didn't get to fill one out and you'd like to come up to the podium, you can get one from Sheila, and we will send it up to the board table. Mr. Cook.
Mr. Mitchner.
Good evening, Board. Jason Mishner, Novi resident. So I thought that was excellent, Ben. Thank you for helping dispel some of the myth that we're totally relying on the state. It's nice to know that as a resident of Novi, there are some things I can do to give back to my school district and contribute to specifically the education and programming and the employment side of the school district, and not just our structures through our bonds and our millages that way. I would be fully of support of that, or even if there's any other opportunities. So thank you for that presentation. I think it dovetails in really well what the Capital Projects Committee talked about Monday, and I'm looking forward to hearing the chair's version of how that meeting went, but it was good to hear that we're taking a look at where we are, and we may want to kind of reconfigure where we're at so that we can get the most done with what we have and come up with a master plan. I know other school districts, other non-public school districts in the area are doing that exact same exercise, one that's not too far to the west specifically. So I think it's good that we as a district have that kind of vision and foresight. So be interested to hearing that report and how that ties in, because I know that affects bonds and villages of that nature as well. And then lastly, speaking of committees, I do hope to see very shortly a DEI committee meeting. I know we were promised at the beginning of this year, one per quarter. We didn't get one for the third quarter of this year, so I'm hoping we can double up and we can get at least 2 more in before the end of the year. It's not like there's a shortage of work to be done in the diversity, equity, and inclusion area for our community and our school district. So I am very hopeful that the board will very quickly pull something together, and especially pulling something in from the curriculum committee meeting that happened in May. There was a lot of good data in that stack. And I think the DEI committee would be a perfect place for that data to be analyzed, to see what we can do for our students who expressed some very good opinions, and there was some really good data that we could analyze and take action on. So thank you tonight for that presentation, and look forward to the future committee meetings and in the finance committee meeting where we'll talk more about villages and non-homestead. So thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Mr. Cook?
Ms. Leppard?
Hi, I'm Sarah Leppard. I live in Novi on Green Tree Lane. I have notes today because I didn't want to forget anything and I didn't want to run out of time. So I'm a counselor at Novi High School. I think most of you know me. But tonight I'm here as a mom and a member of the Novi Mental Health Alliance. I've been a member of the Novi Mental Health Alliance for the last almost 5 years since its inception. And over the years, we've brought many opportunities to the community. We've had Matt Swartz speak on anxiety and parenting through the pandemic. We brought Suzanne Alderson in virtually all the way from the UK to speak on parenting children with mental health issues. She's the founder of the movement Parenting Mental Health. It's a group on Facebook with over 30,000 members. Last spring, we had Dr. Lisa DeMoore. She came and spoke again virtually about anxiety. She's a best-selling author of the books Untangled and Under Pressure. And so I'm excited that this year we're offering something in person. So this Saturday, September 8th, the Novi Mental Health Alliance, in partnership with many organizations, the NEF, the Friends of Novi, SPN Survivors, the Novi Community Coalition, the Novi Public Library, are all coming together, and CNS Health, I don't want to forget them, to provide a wellness event for the community. So our very own Mr. Minka will be having some opening remarks for us. And PJ Brady, the founder of the Brave, Smart, Kind Company and author of the soon-to-be-released book, Raising Kids to be Brave, Smart, and Kind, will be starting the event off. After his keynote, we will have two breakout sessions, and I truly believe have something for everyone. We have Miss Gwen Thomas, the author of Parents' Smart Guide to Sending Your Kids to College Without Going Broke. We'll have a session on getting scholarships to help pay for college. I might be going to that one. Miss Tobis, one of the high school counselors, will be presenting on College Applications 101. We have some people coming in from the Care House, from MSU, speaking on mindfulness for children, the ACEs, screen time. We have a speaker from the Community Financial Credit Union talking about what teens need to know about credit. We have a speaker talking about the state of Black education. Carla Truxell from the SPN Survivors will be talking about building a healthy youth, so there will be things for just us as adults. And there are even more options. I didn't get them all listed. Along with that, we'll be providing breakfast. There's free childcare provided by some amazing high school students that are volunteering the morning of the homecoming dance to provide childcare for our community members, which we have such great kids. So there will be breakfast, childcare. There will be baskets that will be raffled off. Some community organizations have been very generous in what they've offered to give back to the community. There is still time to register, so if you're watching this, you can Google Eventbrite Novi Parent Camp and register there, or go to the NEF website. There's a registration link there. And that's it. Thank you. I'll have these here.
Thank you, Sarah.
Excuse me.
Mr. Cook? Okay.
This isn't a comment, it's this Saturday, October 8th. Sarah had mentioned September 8th, so I just want to make sure everybody knows it's October.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, next on our agenda is the superintendent's report.
Well, it is homecoming, and some of you wore your class colors, some of you didn't, but you'll have to associate with one of the 4 class colors. This is class color day. We've had a lot of fun at the high school, middle school, all throughout the district with kids dressing up. So many activities going around the district. I could talk about those for days, and it's just really fun to watch the kids and the staff working so closely together. There's a photo I would love to just kind of pull up on the screen. We had a interesting situation at the high school where students came forward and proposed. They had a proposal to make a change to the graduation gown. And so this was a graduation, this is a rendering of the new gown. What we determined through the research, and the students brought this idea forward, they said we'd love to have a unified Novi, a gown that we can all wear together, that the tassels and the cords show up really nicely on. And so we found out that we were the only school district in this region, in Livingston and Oakland County, that didn't have one color custom robe. So students are going to start looking to sign up for those, and so that was kind of an exciting thing, and it's neat to see students bring forward an idea and then have that idea come to fruition. So I credit, the high school staff and their hard work for making that happen. So that was kind of exciting. Mrs. Lephart brought up the parent boot camp, which is happening on Saturday morning. Looking forward to all of the amazing things that they have going for that, which is going to be a great event. met this morning, actually, Mr. Jeremini and I had the opportunity to do a television interview with, alongside our own Miss Julie Farkas from the Public Library. And the purpose of the conversation was really to talk about the partnership that the school has with the library. And so I'm excited to see when that gets posted. But we talked a lot about some of the different things that we're doing with the library. One of the big events we had this past week we started with was the parent-to-parent book club. We were doing the book Screenwise, and so we had a great showing of some of our parents that came out to discuss that book and talk a lot about how we're mentoring our students and our children through a digital age where, you know, screen time is a big deal. And so I learned a lot through reading that and just had a great dialogue with the parents. There is a new book that I'm doing for the November parent-to-parent book study. I'll have it at our next board meeting to show you the actual book itself. But the book is called Thrivers by Dr. Michelle Borba. And the book is really about identifying the key traits that help kids thrive, not just strive. And a lot of times our students are strivers because they're looking for the next thing to accomplish, which is great. But they're not necessarily fully focused on balance in their life. And so thriving is really about creating that balance. And it's a great book. It's not a book about everyone getting a trophy. It still talks about grit and all of those things, but I found it to be a phenomenal text, and so I'm excited to talk about that with the parents at the next parent committee. My last thing I have is to just briefly talk about a legislative update. From time to time, I'm on the Oakland County Legislative Committee for the Superintendent's Association, and so I pay quite a bit of attention to what's going on in Lansing, and this is typically a pretty quiet time. So sometimes these updates will be a little bit longer, but I'll just give you a couple things. There was a supplemental spending bill that was passed. This was actually passed last Wednesday night for about $1 billion. There's some money in Senate Bill 842, which really appropriates some dollars for literacy tutoring, as well as for robotics. And so we're gonna be looking into, oftentimes the bills come out, they get passed through committee and conference, and then they go and actually become law when they're signed into law by the governor. But we then trickle down later to figure out how we actually access the money. So I don't have any of those details, just that money has been allocated. Senate Bill 844 was actually providing money to a strategic outreach and attraction reserve fund. And this is really to talking about bringing more workers and retention in the state. And so we believe that there will be some money allocated there for K-12 education. There's an interesting bill coming in the House, and this is a bill, it's House Bill 5703. This is not passed through just yet, but it requires certain sections of the Michigan Constitution and the revised school code to be posted in easily accessible areas of a school building. So this would have an impact on us. We would have to be posting Section 1, Article 8 of the Michigan Constitution, as well as Section 10 of the revised school code. And so it's talking a lot about religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind. And so this bill 5703 is in committee right now, and that would have an impact in the fact that we'd have to be ordering signs and posting those materials. I think there's a really great bill, 5501, it's a House bill. And so what this bill would do would be allow for school districts to equip buses with stop arm cameras. One of the things that we run into is that from a safety perspective, if a citizen or somebody were to, if our bus puts the stop flasher, the stop swing arm comes out and they run by it, sometimes we can't track down who that individual was, and the stop arm cameras will be able to get a copy of that person's license plate. And we believe that in consultation with Novi Police, that'll be a great bill, so we fully support that. One that's gonna have a huge impact, especially based on what I just talked about, House Bill 4530 and 4531 and Senate Bill 130 all eliminate, they're basically trying to consolidate elections. And so it would eliminate the May election date and move the August primary date to June and maintain the November election date. So elections would, in the springtime, would no longer be permissible. We're not sure yet if this would impact a May election for us, but this is kind of an interesting bill, and it would have an impact on us as well. And then I did want to report out that the School Safety Task Force presented to committee. Obviously, we're talking a lot about school safety, and one of the things that the task force introduced was a 14 bill package. I'm not going to go into all the details. They haven't released their final report yet, but Representative Breen is a part of the school safety task force. So she certainly, has a lot of influence on that committee. And I wanted to make sure I brought those bills to your attention, and I will from time to time give you that legislative piece. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Menka.
Thank you.
That was very informative and great. We're going to move on to our administrative reports, and we'll start with Dr. Carino.
Thank you. I also want to reiterate our appreciation for our building principals, having come from just that role. I know how hard they work firsthand, behind the scenes, doing anything and everything that they possibly need to do to make a building run successfully. So I want to recognize them and thank them for their work. Yesterday was World Teachers Day. And so I also want to say thank you to all of our teachers, because they are just in the trenches doing the work that we need them to do with kids. And so we greatly appreciate all of their efforts. This week I had the opportunity to attend the School Safety Summit with our school resource officers. And so we learned just how far we are with our partnership with the Novi Police Department. I spoke to multiple districts who are just, really beginning relationships with their local police departments. And so, we certainly have work to do, but it reinforced how strong our partnership with the Novi Police Department is. We're currently working on applying for a safety and security grant that will, for example, allow us to have our buildings have critical incident mapping. And so that would give detailed maps for all of our buildings and provide information to the Novi Police Department should an emergency occur, with room numbers and access points and all of those things. And they're very excited about the detail that we can provide them. We are hosting our Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations interviews next week. So we are really excited about the candidates that we have coming in. And we are prepared to hopefully have a candidate to recommend to you for the next board meeting. And finally, just this week really reinforces the community school district that we have. I was able to go to the Japan Festival at the high school on Sunday and really celebrate the diversity that we have in our district. And I walked to Woods yesterday and walked around and just saw the excitement of parents being back to cheer on their kids. I was able to attend the Parkview Fun Run for a little while today, and just the excitement of kids having typical activities that we haven't been able to have in 3 years is really exciting to see. And just the support of our families in coming together and supporting our kids is wonderful. All I have for you.
Thank you. Thank you for that report, and it sounds like you've hit the ground running, literally. So thank you. Mr. Jeremini.
Thank you, Dr. Ruskin. Evening, everyone. I have to continue beating the drum of thanking our wonderful principals and assistant principals. I also recently left a principal role and understand how fun and challenging it can be. I know that each of these people jumped into administration or slid into administration or were pushed into administration, however it may be, because they believe that they could have a greater impact on their schools and on their community than they did just from their classroom. And they went to it with that aspirational idea. They're our lead teachers, our lead learners. They develop staff, they coach staff, they lead professional learning. They support curriculum implementation and all of the other things that you've heard tonight. They are role models for our students and our staff, and they are absolutely incredible. Great principal literally makes the world of difference in the school that they're in. And we are really fortunate in this district, I can tell you just in my short time here, to have the principals that we do. So kudos to them and our gratitude. Last week I attended a conference as well. I attended the Great Lakes iReady conference. iReady is our diagnostic and instructional tool. And I'm new to that tool. It's not something that I've used in previous districts. Learned a whole lot about what it can do, and I'm very impressed. It's super helpful for our teachers and our staff to help our students be successful, and I see opportunities for us to actually enhance how we use it, so that's exciting. At this conference, I was also able to observe our own Darby Hoppenstedt and Shaylee Patel present how they used in their department with students, or excuse me, in their departments, this tool, the assessments and the instructional resources, to help ensure that all students are successful. And I will say they did a marvelous job representing their work and representing the district. So much so that once everybody realized I also worked here at this conference, which was the Great Lakes area, everybody wanted to know how they could get a job in Novi. So kudos to them, nice job on the presentation. And of course, we have our district-provided professional development days. Tomorrow, October 7th, is our K-6 professional development day, so those students don't have school. And then on Monday, we have our 7-12 day, so those schools won't have students in session those days. What we're going to be working on those days, so further iReady training, looking at how to use that data to differentiate, take advantage of grouping of students, to utilize, or to take advantage of multiple teachers supporting different groups of students across the elementaries, which is really cool. Collaborating around that data, working on unit design at the secondary level, collaborating around the Understanding by Design framework, which is part of our MyKit plan, and a whole lot more. So this is just the continued implementation of our Michigan Integrated Continuous Improvement Process Plan, which you're all familiar with. We'll continue to sustain that work moving forward. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. All righty, moving on, we will move to board communication. Any board members have anything that they would like to share with each other or the community? Mrs. Roney?
Okay, it was Monday. It's been a long week already. I went, and Ben was there as well, over to Novi Woods, and they christened their little iNest area, and it was great. The second graders sang a little song for us. Actually, they sang 2 little songs for us. Principal Asher got to play his little guitar, which I did not know that, so I guess he's a pretty good guitar player. And we just had a grand time, and it was thanks to, I think it was NEF that originally ponied up the $25,000, but Di Maria and the architect firm, which I don't
TMP?
remember. No.
It wasn't TMP, it was a different
No,
outfit,
it was
yeah.
next to Di Maria, I'm so sorry. But, they, we're sure it was more than 25,000, and they supported the community. And in turn, they're going to do another fundraiser to put up, the sails over it, to block the sun. So if anybody has a few, extra bucks laying around, Novi Woods, I'm sure would love it. But it was a great time. I think that's about it.
Thank you. The amphitheater looks cool. How many kids fit in that space? I mean, I saw it in a picture, so it's probably hard to gauge. Do you think it's a classroom or?
It was like 100 kids.
Okay. It's really neat.
And of course it depends on the size, the
Right.
fit more little bodies than big
More
bodies.
kindergartners than fourth graders,
Yeah,
right?
but it's just an awesome space. You have the wildflowers growing around it, and then the high school made some little stake charms, out of ceramic. It's just, if you have time, go over and look at it, because I want to go grab a book and just sit there and read, but
That's
then I
awesome.
might get that suspicious person on the ground, so.
Thank
But-
you. Any other board reports? Mr. Cook, please.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to catch a unified soccer game. The odd part about it was the opposing team, hard-fought battle, Novi lost by 2. But the opposing team was a little confused. Mr. Giramini was standing there with green on.
Once a Raven, always a Raven.
Wasn't enough to confuse them to lose, but it was, it's quite a thrill to go see those kids compete with other kids and get out there and do things like that. I'm glad we broadened beyond just basketball into soccer, robotics. I'm not sure how many we have now.
Bocce.
Bocce, all right. That'll be a hard-fought battle.
Mm-hmm.
But the more opportunities we can give those kids, the better off we'll be, and the smiles on their faces, even losing, was well worth it. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Smith?
I want to echo what Mary Ann said and say that Monday was cool with Novi Woods and kicking off their outdoor amphitheater. and also support and congratulate NEF for being the conduit for that. To remind everybody, Representative Kelly Breen had organized a $400,000 grant from the state of Michigan, and the first $200,000 has been received, and that money is going directly to the schools. And it's just great to actually see. Many of you were in the audience when we announced that, I was still part of NEF then, when we announced that we received the $400,000. The first $200,000 came in, and then you can actually see where that money's going. And that's stuff that's obviously beyond the scope of what the district's able to provide, but is a benefit directly to not just the staff, but the students as well. So I think that's awesome. And then I also want to remind everybody, as Ben mentioned, it is homecoming. And although it's going to be chillier tomorrow, there is a parade that organizes at Parkview, I think a lot of you know, and then goes down Taft Road to the high school. Different than in previous years, all the different grades are not building their own float to represent their grade. But this year for the parade, there will be a float. I know a junior student that decided to take it upon himself to build a float in his father's driveway, which has been fantastic. But if anybody is out there that has never ridden on a float in a parade or might want to stand around and be on the float and listen to some music, it's a Hollywood theme, if you didn't know, so you can dress up as your favorite Hollywood character and stand on the float and ride down Taft. I can tell you that a responsible 21-year-old plus will be driving the pickup truck, pulling the float. No guesses. So I promise to drive safely and slowly, and I won't injure your child, I hope. But anyway, I just want to throw that out there. So come and support the effort. It'll be the pep rallies during the school during the day, and then the parade down Taft, and then the football game. It should be a great day.
Awesome.
So thanks.
you.
That's it.
Any other board reports?
I just have a question
Yeah.
for Tom. What are you dressing up as?
I'm dressing up as the pickup truck driver. My commitment is to be slow and sober.
Wearing the trucker's hat.
Oh, 10-4, good buddy.
Any other reports? Okay.
Not really a report, but we do have a DEI committee scheduled for 7:30 in the morning on next Thursday.
Okay. And
So,
you're the chair, so
I
you'll
am
be
the
ready to.
the chair. So Ben and I have been
Jason will bring donuts.
talking about, the agenda and giving Ben a little bit of a chance to review some of the previous, efforts and work, so.
Yeah,
Awesome.
looking forward to it.
Thank you. I did want to mention, I don't know all the details of the dates. I know some were last Friday, some were coming up, but I would like to thank the parents who donated to the fun runs, because I know each of the schools had fun runs, and Mrs. Murphy from Parkview reached out to me about today's fun run, and it sounded like they did an exceptional job raising money for their schools. And if you times that by 4 or 5 schools, it's really a lot of support that the community has offered these elementary schools to do some great things for their kids outside of what we are able to do. So kudos to all the parent volunteers and for those kids just having a great day. I know in Deerfield they do a color run, so they get splashed with color, which is always probably fun and exciting, and the principals probably, as Dr. Carino shakes her head as a former principal, fun and exciting, right? All righty. We will move on to our consent agenda this evening. We have 3 items, but on our consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes, the regular meeting minutes of September 22nd, 2022. And then we have 2 field trips, which is the Novi High School varsity hockey field trip in January of 2023, and the Novi High School choir trip, which is coming back after several years, February 2023. So if I can get a recommendation, Mrs. Hood?
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education approve the consent items as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Hood and supported by Mrs. Roney. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next, we'll move on to donations. We have 2 donations here on our list. We have one for robotics, and one for athletics. So I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Micah to give the details.
Sure. So the first donation is, for your consideration, is a donation from Magna to robotics in the amount of $1,000. That recommendation for you to accept the donation is presented with appreciation.
Thank you. If we can get a recommendation. Mr. Cook, please.
I move that the Novi Community School Board of Education accepts the donation as presented with appreciation and thanks.
Support.
Recommended by Mr. Cook and supported by Mr. Mena. Anybody have any comments or questions before we vote?
I mean, obviously, these donations are really critical to our robotics teams. And it's fantastic that we have so many different people that are willing to support the efforts of our kids in that direction. It's such a fun event to watch. So, and I know they also provide some mentors sometimes that come out and assist the kids too. So it's just really a fantastic partnership.
Mr. Cook?
Yeah, Magna being the original sponsor for the robotics and have been with them since day one and still with them. It says a lot for Magna to support our kids that way.
Year after year. Yeah, it's really fantastic. Okay, if we're ready to vote, say, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you to Magna. Our second donations is athletics. Mr. Micah.
Yeah, this is a continuation of our conversation that we had a few board meetings ago. I had the opportunity to meet with all of the PTO and Booster Club presidents at our interschool council. And just, we worked through the process of the donations to the board. And so the Novi Athletic Boosters graciously provided this list of their fall grants, and as well as several other things. They're for team spirit wear sales, as well as school beautification, and the generous total of $10,092 from our athletic boosters.
If we can get a recommendation. Mrs. Hood?
I move that the Novi Community Schools Board of Education accept the donations as presented with appreciation and thanks.
Do we have support?
I'll support.
Recommended by Mrs. Hood and supported by Mrs. Roney. Any comments or questions? Mr. Mena?
Yeah, I've been involved with the athletic boosters now for well over a dozen years, and I can tell you the work that they do is absolutely fantastic. So much thanks to them. I know they've donated just a ton of money over the years, an incredible amount of money, and I see all of the different events that they run to raise money. So kudos to that group, and especially under the leadership of Amy Mattis, who's currently the NAB president, and Sherry Van Kirk, who was the previous president.
Thank you, Mr. Mena. I know I said to Mr. Micah, I think it's really fantastic to have these reports brought to the board. I think it's important to acknowledge, as Mr. Mena just did, all the work that gets put into this, and really to see the grants and all the wonderful things that we're providing our athletes. So, Mr. Cook?
Not only thanking the boosters, but those that donated to the boosters so that the boosters could do this.
Right.
It's not, it is wonderful that we have so many organizations to support our students, and, the athletic boosters are just one of them.
Absolutely.
Appreciate those that support them.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Next on our agenda is closed session. Mr. Micah.
We are asking and seeking for the board to move into closed session for the purpose of negotiations, section OMA section 8.2.
Can I get a recommendation?
I'll move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education move into a closed session for the purpose of negotiations.
Do we have support?
Support.
And if we can get a roll call vote there, Mrs. Murphy?
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Hood?
Yes.
Mr. Mena?
Yes.
Mrs. Murphy, yes. Mrs. Roney?
Yes.
Dr. Ruskin?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion.
Sorry. You said.
Motion carries.
Motion carries 7-0. And just for everybody who might not actually have a copy of tonight's agenda, we do have action items, information and discussion, and some committee reports. So should not be very long, and then we will get back out here and move through the rest of our process.
Come on, woman.
Just go ahead.
It just wasn't the right thing right now.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
we're back.
Okay.
Garden level.
You can be back.
All right, we're back from our closed session, so we will continue on our agenda. We have a handful of 5 action items this evening. We'll start with the personnel report.
Better
Mr.
hammer him.
Micah.
For our personnel report, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Carino.
Thank you. We have 2 new hires tonight, one of which who is here today. So first, Christy Buttermore will be working at Adult Ed as an ESL teacher, and Joseph Green is being recommended to be the Assistant Auditorium Manager. Our retirements and resignations include Lisa Rice from Novi Virtual. She is a 2nd grade teacher. She will be retiring effective January 31st, 2023. Lynn Ball is a teacher consultant at Career Prep. She will be resigning effective September 6th. And Andrew Giddings also resigned as an ESL teacher at Adult Education on September 14th, and we have no leaves of absence.
Thank you, Dr. Carino. If I may get a motion for the recommendation? Mrs. Hood?
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education adopts the personnel report recommendations as presented.
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Hood and supported by Mr. Cook. Any questions or comments regarding the personnel report?
No.
If I am able to call Mr. Green up to just introduce himself
That would be
and
great.
welcome him officially to know.
That would be
Thank you.
great.
Well, we do it after we vote.
Oh, we should
Oh,
probably
you should
vote
vote
first.
first.
Mr. Green will call you in a minute. You can come up.
It's looking good. It's looking good.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Hood?
Well, I did, but it didn't involve Mr. Green, although I will personally welcome you. I just wanted to say Lisa Rice. So Lisa is at the virtual school right now, which I didn't realize until I talked to Tom that she had moved from Village Oak. So Lisa taught our 2 boys back when we had looping, 1st and 2nd grade. So probably starting 19 years ago. I can't do the math that fast. And so Lisa was in our lives closely for 4 years. And I know she's got big plans moving forward, so I would like to just say what a loss for us, but I wish her well. Oh, and one more thing, at the pancake breakfast, the NEF pancake breakfast, I bought 2 opportunities for Mr. Manka to take her place for an
Yeah.
afternoon. So I'm gonna have to talk to them either, unless it happens
Trade
You
it
need
up.
to transfer?
before
It's not
January.
transferable.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hood. I too would like to acknowledge Lisa. She is a bit of a legend here in Novi Community School District. She has been here she's been a teacher for 30 years. She does not look old enough to have taught for 30 years, but she always, just like I described Katie Dinkelman earlier with her green shoes and her just spunk and looked like one of the kids, and Lisa is definitely one of the same. So I know she's committed. I see friends and colleagues shaking their head. I know she's committed a lot of time to the NEA, just as she has to her students. So we wish her the best of luck. Any other comments?
I have to say the
Smith?
same thing. I've been blessed and fortunate to know Lisa and to have a chance to read to her beautiful 1st grade children. And, that's a powerful section of VO with Jen Smith on one side and Lisa right across the hall. Both former NEF Teachers of the Year winners, both got new cars and both pillars within our school district. And I can say without a doubt that Lisa truly was and is still, obviously until January, one of our district's finest teachers. And I would in a heartbeat feel comfortable with any of my 3 kids being under her care. And just a beautiful, beautiful person. So that's all.
Thank you, Tom. All righty. So seeing no more comments or questions, we are ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Dr. Carino.
Now I would like to introduce Mr. Green and welcome him officially to the Novi family. So please tell us where you're from, because I know you just had a move.
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised in East Point, Michigan, graduated from Saginaw Valley State University with a degree in theater and creative writing. I ended up, as soon as I graduated in 2019, I moved down to Atlanta, Georgia, lived there for a few years, started working with nonprofit theaters in that area, and just recently left the Atlanta Lyric Theater. Their focus was a lot of Golden Age musical theater, kind of real crowd pleasers, in all kinds of different capacities with them, both administrative and technical. And I just this past Saturday drove 14 hours in a truck with just me and my dog, and got here safe and sound, and I'm excited to start working with everybody here.
Thank you. Welcome to Novi, and I'm sure you will work closely with our really talented students, and I can see that you guys will connect and probably have a blast there over in our auditorium, so.
I got a quick one.
Yes.
I know how Justin would answer this. Ryan refused and insists she's an early education teacher. What's your favorite musical? And Willie and I would like a blue spot to be able to shine down on us if we have questions.
I'm sure.
Can you do some of that? Maybe have it pivot so that it can go to whichever trustee is speaking at the time, just a little.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do. I'll see. I'll put that in Justin's.
I expect you bring a little something fresh and you'll jazz it up. So if you were gonna do a musical, what would it be?
I used to not be a huge fan of musical theater, and then I worked with this theater in depth. And we just recently closed a production of Matilda, a musical that was absolutely stunning, and I think that would be like such an exciting show for younger children to see. I mean, it's so exciting about reading and about learning, and it makes something like that seem a lot more fun than just sitting down and, reading a book or listening to a teacher.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
Great answer.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Next, we will move on to our next action item, which is the surplus property. Mr. Meinkauf.
So under our surplus property policy, policy 5004, equipment and supplies need to be remitted or disposed of in a proper manner. And so that requires board approval. After a thorough review, we've had a number of musical instruments at the middle school with a value of about $750 per instrument potentially that was determined. It was before the board for information and discussion on September 22nd. Mr. Cook had a great idea to see if there were other districts that would be benefiting from these instruments. I had reached out to a few. We're going to still look at a few, but we did have an opportunity to learn of a musical recycling and instrument recycling program that allows for a lot of the parts to be recycled and repurposed for other departments if needed. So I think we'll be able to dispose of these properly, and we appreciate your support in this.
Thank you. If I may get a motion for the recommendation? Mr. Cook.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the disposal of these obsolete end-of-life instruments by either selling them to the highest bidder, by donation to appropriate parties, or by proper waste removal or recycling.
Support.
Any, recommended by Mr. Cook. He threw me off there for a minute. Supported by Mr. Mena. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. Our next item is Sex Education Advisory Board process. Mr. Meinkauf.
Had the opportunity at our last board meeting to share the process for bringing our SEAB board back into the applicable laws and being compliant. The process requires the board's approval. Once the board approves the process, we will go about putting the interest form out there, soliciting input from parents, as well as informing current SEAB members that they can reapply if they would like. And at our next board meeting, we would hope to have a list of candidates for the position that we would have selected, and we would need the board by law to approve the co-chairs of the SEAB board. So that process has been laid out for you and is there for your approval this evening.
Thank you. Do we have motion, Mrs. Murphy?
I move that in the Novi Community School District, the Novi Board of Education approve the Sex Education Advisory Board membership process as presented.
Do we have support?
Support.
Recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mrs. Roney. Any questions that you may have or comments?
Just comments?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
No, thank you, Ben, for taking care of this. As we know, the creation of the SEAB had not been previously following law, and that caused a lot of contention in the community. I know I fielded a lot of calls from members on that committee who didn't feel that there was a good diversity of opinion. So I'm really hoping that this new process will fix that issue.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Mrs. Hood?
Yeah, I would like to comment, just on that last comment, that Dr. Matthews did confirm with through law at the time that we, up to that point, we were in compliance with the law. And it was after that that Dr. Ruskin chose to pull back, which was perfectly, made sense to me, but I wanted to correct that. So I was noticing on, so thank you, Mr. Manka, for all your work that you and our other administrative team
Mr.
did.
Giramini, yeah.
Mr. Giramini. I had a question about the members, the list by role. So we've got several teachers, and there is no teacher from the K through 3 portion of the district, and I assume that omission is intentional, but can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. So we do not teach sex education or any of those standards in anything prior to 4th grade. And so as a result of that, the committee really does require teachers at the grade levels that sexual education is taught. And so because it's not taught prior to that, we don't have teacher representation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cook?
One comment, one question. Comment is, parents cannot serve, teachers and parents cannot serve dual roles by law.
Right.
So a teacher cannot sit as a parent and a parent, or teacher and parent, and parents cannot sit as teachers and parents.
Correct.
My question is, based off of the quantity of people we had in the last, in the other one, what happens if we don't get enough people here? We can be flexible. This is the maximum number we would see, I assume. And if we ended up not getting enough, seeing the parents have to make up at least half, where are we gonna fall short?
Sure.
There's a lot of ones in here.
Yep, so the law requires that you have to have one member of the clergy. It also requires that over half of the membership be made up of parents. So if we did not find enough parent representation, then we would have to create a smaller committee, in which case we would have to take out some of the members that were not legally required to be there. Or we would come back to you at the next board meeting and say, we'd like to re-solicit and try and talk to our parents and families and see if we could drum up some more support. I have a tendency to believe, based on the parent involvement I've seen, that we're gonna have enough. But it's possible that we could get into that. And so we have to follow the law and say, if half of them have to be parents, then we would have to find ways to pull away on some of the other staff positions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Could I just clarify one thing?
Sure.
Just a point of clarification on the membership of the parents. So, at least half the whole committee has to be parents or guardians of students in our school district. The majority of that set cannot be employed by a school district.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments? I would just like to say I really, really appreciate the transparency, the clarity on this chart, this process that the board is approving tonight that you guys all worked on. I appreciate the work that was done even prior to that by policy committee. And I especially want to thank members who've sat on this committee prior to kind of just taking a step back and having our new administration come in and give us some guidance and some help and some process. Sheila Ebel worked tirelessly on this committee, and so I want to acknowledge her and thank her for all the work that she did. And I look forward to just these clear guidelines and getting parents involved and all of the other member lists and their roles to continue to move forward in a really positive way for all of our students. So, seeing no other comments, I think we are ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Our next action item is the Novi Education Association 2022-23 wage agreement. Mr. Meinka.
Thank you. So I had the pleasure of getting a chance to sit down. Dr. Carino and I had the chance to sit down with some of our NEA members, our teachers. And, you know, it's been, we've now are a couple month and a half into school. And, you know, it's a great opportunity to sit down and say, how are we supporting our teachers? And obviously with the outgoing Mr. McIntyre leaving, you know, there were some questions on some of those things. We've been fortunate to be able to run, get some support from the outside. But I think this is an opportunity to just acknowledge the fact that our teachers are working very hard. It's been a very tough few years. Certainly, we want to do everything we can to remind them how important they are to us. And so we're very appreciative of the fact that they have passed their side of the agreement. It's here for you to consider tonight. The NEA bargaining team was comprised of Grat Dalton from the MEA, both business representative of the MEA, and then Heather Burnside, Kimberly Osmondson, and Mr. Matthew Burry. Our district bargaining team included myself and Dr. Carino. This is a wage reopener, which is a part of the 22-23 school year, the contract that expires at the end of this year, and it is there for your consideration this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Meinka. If I can get a motion for the recommendation, Mr. Mena?
Yeah, I move that the board approve the NEA wage agreement as presented.
Support.
Do we have any questions or comments?
Well, just appreciate the work on behalf of both sides. Sounds bad. Both parties involved. And certainly the smoothness that it seems like this occurred with, especially with some new faces, getting to know each other and all that. So, you know, just really appreciate the time taken to delve into this and resolve it for the next year.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions? Okay. Seeing none, I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you to everybody who sat on that team, and we hope we can continue to support each other moving forward for our kids. We will move on to action item, the final one tonight, which is the Novi Maintenance International Union of Operating Engineers Local 324, their 2022 to 2025 contract. Mr. Meinka.
Had the pleasure again of having the opportunity to bargain with our maintenance team. These are some of the, you know, least people that are really not seeking out a whole lot of accolades or credit, but they really make a lot of things happen in our district. They're a small but mighty crew, and we appreciate their work so much. And so the IUOE, which is our maintenance bargaining team, was comprised of Kevin Bessenson, Adam Hutchinson, both business representatives of the IUOE, and Chris Jordan. The district bargaining team included myself, Dr. Carino, Mr. Dragoo, Mr. Heddle, and Mrs. Valentine from Transportation. And so their agreement is a 3-year agreement, which is a very exciting thing for them and for the district, and it is there for your consideration this evening.
Thank you. If I can get a motion for the recommendation, Mrs. Murphy.
I move that the Novi Community School District Board of Education approve the International Union of Operating Engineers Bargaining Unit Contract Agreement.
Do we have
Support.
recommended by Mrs. Murphy and supported by Mr. Cook? Any questions or comments in this regard? Oh, okay. Mr. Cook?
I just want to say that, yeah, these guys do not look for accolades, but they deserve it with the way they keep the grounds up, they keep the buildings running, and keep all the equipment in the buildings running. They're well deserved, you know, they are well represented here, and The other thing is, every year we end up with nothing but superior ratings on our buses, so our transportation technicians are keeping that fleet going, so.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Mr. Smith?
I started thinking about it when we were in the other room during closed session. And it's not uncommon for us to have teachers in the audience. I know it wasn't that long ago that RJ sat in Mike's chair and read off the names, I think, of every single teacher in the district in an effort to, offer thanks and appreciation for them. So my point is, I think it would be cool for us to at least make an effort to invite this team. I believe there were no females on the team, but we could invite those guys, so I could say that loosely, invite all the guys to show up one night. It wouldn't take too much to get a few pizzas and at least have them come in a half hour, like 6:30, and get to meet them and thank them personally. And then if they want to stay at 7 o'clock, we could recognize them at the podium. And then I'd also like to do the same thing. There used to be a song we'd sing at Grand Rapids Catholic Central called Hail to the Bus Driver.
Well, you can teach that to us.
Yes.
He drinks and he cusses, I can't go any further. So,
maybe
but
not.
I think that's another group that really is unheralded.
Yeah.
But I just think of my son who, like I've talked about, knew his bus driver and, would give him hugs. And so I think that would be a way for us to, again, be better as a board to recognize these folks because they play an equal role. So I just want to throw that out, Ben. I don't know if Sheila, if that's something, if we agree or want to consider it, that we could.
Dr. Carino's taking
Yeah,
vigorous
but,
notes
look
over
at the
there.
calendar and pick a bus driver day, pick a maintenance day, and we can add it to the teacher day. Doesn't have to be a statewide thing. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you.
There's no snowstorm.
Yeah, no snowstorm that day.
Yeah.
Maybe in the summer,
just gonna
springtime.
Say too that the hours that they keep,
Change that.
change a lot. They have to be able to pivot and shift awfully quickly, whether that's the weather or a flood or
Dr.
anything
Carino will
like that.
figure it out.
So,
Very talented.
so we really do appreciate those people that are getting up and making sure that everything is safe for our kids to come to school.
Like when I saw Jeff's here, like you said, Paul, 34 years. I mean, do you guys know we have our maintenance team that have worked here for 34 years and they never got a dinner. So anyway,
We'll make sure we do it before.
It's the old roast joke. So let's get some pizza.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. And thank you to the bargaining team. I know, again, we always don't know what goes on behind the scenes when kids are in school and in buildings and everybody's doing their job, but we do appreciate all the work so that we can come together and everyone can work together and feel great about being a part of the Novi Community School District. So I think that's fantastic. So seeing no more comments, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries 7-0. We're going to move on to our information and discussion. We have the Raptor Visitor Management System Policy. Mr. Meinke.
Sure, I'll give a little background here. So we have a system in our district called Raptor, which is about to be deployed this year. Raptor essentially allows for a driver's license or state-issued identification badge to be issued when you come into the school as a volunteer. And at that time, it will run a quick background check to make sure that we're running all of the databases to ensure that we don't have a volunteer coming in who is potentially a danger to children. So the Raptor program is great, and that's not really the purpose of this policy addition. But the issue at hand is that the law recently changed around individuals who are on the sex offender registry in the state of Michigan. And it used to be that there was a hard and fast rule that anyone on that registry was not permitted to be in a school building. And that law has changed a little bit because of the fact that there are certain people who were appealing, their sentencing to that list. And so to be able to deploy Raptor, we really needed to have something in policy that would say, that would not bar someone permanently, but would still give the district the ability to exclude. And so the policy is there. I've had a conversation with a few of you that had some questions or would like to see maybe some changes to that. We did review this at the policy committee. And so the recommended language is there, but we are certainly open to making adjustments if the board would like us to do so.
Thank you. I think that, will you read the
Yeah,
language?
I can read
And
it.
then the conversation, for people who don't have this in front of them, will make a little more sense.
Sure, so policy 7010 relates to our volunteers. We're recommending to add proposed language that volunteers are required to produce a driver's license or state-issued identification card before being permitted to volunteer. The district will use the volunteer's driver's license or state-issued identification card to determine whether the prospective volunteer appears on the Michigan Sex Offender Registry or comparable registry in another state. An individual who is identified as appearing on a state registry will not be permitted to volunteer that day. The district will review the specific circumstances surrounding the individual's inclusion on the list to determine eligibility to volunteer in the future.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, comments, starts of discussion? Mrs. Hood?
Yeah, I was, alarmed is not the right word. I didn't understand why we would, I didn't understand how this came about. I know the law has changed. I was one of the board members who talked to Mr. Minka, and he explained it to me. But as far as volunteers, and I guess I won't ask, what technically is a volunteer? Is it somebody who sells hot dogs at concessions, or as a district, let me start over. Someone who appears on the sex offender registry is there for a reason. They have been convicted of something on the one of the offenses that is on the list. And so in terms of just a plain old volunteer, and I don't know how many people we have volunteering in the district who are not parents in the district. And so that's the set of people that I am thinking of. I don't think it is a good role for the district and the administrators who would make this decision, I assume, whether we will forego a person's presence on that list if they're volunteering. I think that is a different topic if a parent of a student in the district is on that list, because right now they're not allowed to attend any school event. Is that correct,
Correct.
Mr. Minka?
Mhm.
Okay. So I can certainly see that we would want to review and, give, have some flexibility that those parents could certainly attend their child's activities. But I don't see why we would take it on as a district of an outside volunteer, and I don't know of any, but as an outside volunteer coming in who wants to volunteer, but they're on the sex offender registry, it just seems, are we that desperate for volunteers? I don't think so. And I think it opens up a risk to the district that we shouldn't take, and I don't think we should put that risk on our administrators who might look at a person's case and think, oh, well, they're on the registry, but I think they should be able to volunteer even though they don't have a student in the district. If that makes sense. I don't understand why we would have that exception.
So, Kathy, I'm just gonna kind of piggyback off of you, because I had a few questions too, and I talked to Mr. Minka, and a couple of those things I said, and they're really, I don't have solutions, but just questions and points, is I think we need some clarity on who the district is, where it says the district will review, because I agree with you that you certainly don't want to put that onus on one individual, whether it be a superintendent or whether it be the secretary at one of the elementary schools.
Or the school resource officer, possibly?
Well, I felt like the school resource officer should be part of what the district actually is. So if the words "the district" means a group of people who look at the information and make that determination, that the school resource officer should actually be a part of that team, but not individually doing it. There shouldn't be one individual making that determination. And then we kind of went into this conversation about the volunteering. And so we talked about what that would mean. And I think it's like a double-edged sword. It's tricky because let's go with if you have a Halloween party at an elementary school. So, and you have the Raptor system in place, which that's really not on the table. So the important piece of it is we have to have guidelines that help guide our staff and our really our office staff to make sure that when something comes through on the Raptor system, that we have policies in place. So I think this is necessary. The question is all the little minutia that goes along with it and the details. So you have a Halloween party at an elementary school, and parents come in to volunteer, meaning they're running a station, they get there a little early, they set up, or parents come in to attend the Halloween party. They're not really volunteers. So I don't think it really matters about volunteers or not volunteers. You have a time frame where there's an event inside of a school during school hours where you have access to kids. And so the question that I had was, when those parents, the 60 of them, walk in the door, are all 60 of them going to have to present their ID and go through the Raptor system? And then based on that answer, I think we could go down the list of answering some of those questions that you had. And is the answer yes, they would have to go through the Raptor system?
Yes, so.
Whether they're running a station or they're coming to see, little Charlie dressed as a pirate.
Yeah, Raptor is really designed for in-school activities during the school day. If we were to have somebody coming into the buildings, parent or volunteer, to be, in a classroom of sorts, that would be a time where the Raptor would be used. Contrast that with, say, an after-hours PTO event, it likely would not be. So, you see, it's really what's going on during the school day. And so we could craft, from this conversation, I think we could come up, with Mr. Smith's, consent as the policy chair, could come up with some additional language that we could maybe look at the next meeting potentially to see if it's kind of, representing some of the different thoughts. And then, of course, Dr. Carino will be able to work with our legal counsel on that. Do you want to speak to any of this?
Yeah, so we had some meetings with the vendor that manufactured Raptor and asked that question because some of the concern was there's one Raptor system per building. And so on an example for a Halloween parade at an elementary school, you have hundreds and hundreds of parents coming through. And so we asked, how quickly can we process one visitor at a time? And it takes about 40 seconds to a minute. And so if you think about if we were to make them each scan their ID and print this badge, we would not be able to process that volume. So the goal is not really to run the system for visitors, it's really to run the system for volunteers. And so I think the difference would be if we just had parents or volunteers or visitors lining the hallway or the gym to be able to see students at a Halloween parade, we would not be using the Raptor system. However, if they were staying for an individualized classroom party and running a station, then we would. And we get far less of those volunteers in a day on those special occasions than just looking for the parade. If we were to hold a concert during the school day and they would just be observers, we would not be using the Raptor system for that. But if they were to go back and, help in the music room, they would be through the Raptor system. What we're going to do is we are writing basically a script for secretaries to be able to refer to the exact verbiage of what they would say to a person if they received a positive match. And we did not want them to be the ones that shared that information. So we had a specific script that shared, there was a process, and so they would immediately go get the building principal. If that building principal was not available at that time, they would be directed to come to my office at ESB. If they had a positive match, the goal is not really to be able to find ways that we would say we're gonna forgo that. They're not able to, they are able to volunteer. It's very similar to what we're doing with the iChat. If a parent has a felony or a volunteer has a felony, it doesn't matter. They have a felony and we're not permitting them to volunteer. And so we're not really looking at this verbiage to be able to say, well, we're gonna use some discretion. When we talked to Troon Law, they really just said, you don't wanna make it so ironclad that if you absolutely have a rare exception that you wanted to make it, you didn't just wanna say automatically if they had a positive match that you would say no. And so it just always gives a little bit of like an option that if for some reason you said this was 30 years ago, you know, if you put a time limit on it, you know, and you could just have some information, but that would be a district decision. So they just didn't recommend us saying automatically a positive match is a no. And they said usually that doesn't stand up in court if you just automatically give a blanket statement. And so they said usually you just say, you know, you're not able to volunteer today and we'll make a further determination. But our goal is not to use it for every visitor because it just would not be feasible with one badge printing system to run that. And like Mr. Micah said, we would not be using it after hours.
Do we think that, just for a little clarity potentially, which could help the conversation, and I don't know the answer, in addition to the word volunteer, in parentheses, it just offers some clarifying verbiage that people could all understand.
Sure.
And, or, I'm assuming that as the policy committee works through policy that they're working on and, AR, that there's gonna be some administrative regulations that go along with this to give further explanation than what's written here. Is that correct? Mrs. Murphy?
Yeah, so, just for clarification, is there a section in our policy, I'm trying to remember, that has definitions already? We used to have a whole section on definitions.
Not currently.
Okay, so either that needs addressed or we need to, I would agree, there needs to be some definition of what a volunteer is. I guess I also want to say that I do understand the reason for this because there are some young men on the sex offender registry that were 18 years old in high school and got convicted because their girlfriend was a minor. And so there are people that you might want to, I mean, they're a parent now maybe, right? Or they're an older brother. And that information would be available too. So not that there's a ton of them, but, you know, there would be some where that you would want to leave room for the determination to allow them to participate, I would think. That's just my 2 cents.
Can I ask one more question, and then I see some hands raised? Is this going to parallel the other system that you described? Because the way it's really written, it talks about the volunteers are required to produce a driver's license before being permitted to volunteer, but it doesn't say specifically what we all just talked about in the school day during school hours. I mean, there's so many volunteers, and so I think that we need a little clarity around that. Mrs. Roney?
Well, my question is once you get run, you know, like you volunteer the first week of school, you take your license, you're good. Every time, is there a way to keep those on file that, no, so every time?
Yeah, so unlike an iChat that we do once a year, the first time, this would be every time that they volunteer because iChat is one point in time, this is live data. So the difficulty with the iChat is after we run it, you know, potentially a volunteer could have a felony and be charged. And we would technically not approve that the following year, but we wouldn't have that information until we ran those chats the following year. This is live, real-time data, and so we would expect that every time they have to come in and swipe their, you know, identification card, and that would give us, you know, current information should something have changed since the last time. So there is no short, it might be like 15 seconds shorter after the second time, but it's not substantially shorter, but it is expected that every time.
Okay, just trying to save time.
So this methodology, swiping your ID, it produces the visitor pass for them.
Correct.
So rather than just handing out a bunch of stickers, they have to earn it by swiping their ID.
Well, not necessarily. The schools, to my understanding, and again, as a reminder, this just came up
Yeah.
to our committee this week.
Yeah.
It's just information and discussion, and obviously, there's a lot of discussion. Visitors will still be allowed to come into the building and sign somebody out or drop something off, or I think even go read for 15 minutes in the media center and not be necessarily considered a volunteer. But that's what we need to define. That's what we need to define. We have not yet defined what a volunteer is. So there's work that needs to be done. I'm just letting you guys know, it's information and discussion. We need to figure out what's visitor, what's volunteer. Is it, if you're gonna volunteer every day for a 5-day period, is it gonna be our policy that every day you need to come in and go through this, or is it good for a week? I know that the Boy Scouts of America aren't always the gold emblem to hold up with this type of thing, but we do the iChat and it's once a year, so I agree that probably more than once a year is a good idea. I don't know if every day is the answer, but that's what we need to figure out. And I think we need all the people to have comments or questions. I mean, the whole thing I brought up is do all of our volunteers have a state ID or a driver's license? There's a lot of things you can do in this country without producing a valid ID. So, you know, there's some things we need to work through.
Okay. Mr. Cook?
Yeah, and what we were told in the committee, the reason for this is because the law had changed, allowing people on the Michigan Sex Offender Registry to volunteer. This is our way of saying, time out, basically, we want to check.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mrs. Hutt?
Yeah, and I agree with that, and to Mrs. Murphy's point, I'm sure there are extenuating circumstances for a lot of folks who are on that registry, and they're on it for a particular reason, but it's really not so relevant anymore. My position, though, in what I know, is I don't think the district really benefits from allowing just a plain old volunteer with no student or family member in the district. I don't know what the benefit is for having a policy to let us have discretion over whether that person may volunteer. If it's a family member, I think the district should have discretion over whether that person, that family member of a current student, is allowed to volunteer and be in the schools. So that's all. I didn't mean to,
No, but
I
you're
know I
right.
used the word alarmed, but I didn't mean it quite like that. But, I mean, I think it's nice that the law gives us some leeway and some discretion, and I think we should use it, but I think we should use it in a very narrow field.
It's not the law that's giving us the discretion to use it. The law basically said, allow, and we're saying, no, we want to check.
Okay.
And part of the tricky part is deciding who the district's going to be.
Yes.
Correct.
That's the slippery slope.
So we will work through pulling a lot of this feedback together, and then we'll have a different look at this. Dr. Carino and I will work together with our council, and we'll try and come up with something else.
Great, perfect. Thank you. Alrighty, next we have 2 committee reports. The first one is the Government and Policy Committee, and that is Mr. Smith.
Thank you. We met this past Monday afternoon, October 3rd. I was president as committee chair. Trustee Cook and Trustee Mena are on the committee. We were joined by Superintendent Micah and Dr. Carino, and we were also joined by 2 members from Troon Law Firm. We had Jennifer Starland, who had presented to us on a previous issue, updating us on Title IX, for example, and Ray Davis from the firm as well. And they gave a pretty detailed, 45 to 50-minute presentation and conversation about updating our policy manual. And that would include what we call now administrative regulations. In their verbiage, they use the term administrative guidelines. So we'd have AGs instead of ARs. But as a current client of theirs, we would also be entitled to favorable pricing should we decide to revamp our policy guide. Regardless of our decision to move forward or not with a new firm, our committee is tasked with revisiting our entire policy guide, which we have to do with some regularity. If we proceed with hiring Troon to revamp our guide, we would of course accomplish that because the entire book, if you will, would be revisited and approved, which is going to mean a lot of work for everyone at this table. We would start with a basic skeleton of what they would provide. From there, we would be tasked as an entire board. So all seven of us would get a Word copy of the document. They will help look at what we currently have in place with regards to mapping some of the things or the nuances that we have as Novi to their policy. But we would be asked to review different sections one at a time and make it quote-unquote our own. One of the advantages is they, of course, sit down as a firm and review their policy manual on an annual basis and provide updates as different laws change. So we're obviously current clients of this firm, and the presentation we thought would provide us some benefits. My thanks to Mr. Cook for suggesting that we also invite our current provider to come back in, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and present to us about, well, if you want to stick with us, here's what we could do differently, or here's what we would do in addition to, or whatever, but at least hear them out before deciding to go to another provider. That was the gist of that meeting. Where it stands now, of course, and obviously as no decisions were made, we're gonna wait and speak with, it's not Lusk. What
It
was
used
it?
to be Lusk, now it's Miller.
Miller, yeah.
Miller Johnson.
So we're gonna meet with hopefully someone from Miller Johnson. Ben will let us know if we're successful at getting a date for that. They, of course, could decline to come back in. But we're gonna look at that, and then, after meeting with them, we would bring it back to the board, for information and discussion. And, all right, do I have to separate you two? No. Where's the hammer? Okay, so, we might bring, Jennifer from Troon is making herself available to stand up there and answer questions that we have as a board. So that was the big part. I also want to thank Ben for your work on the SEAB. That was something that we were trying to figure out as a governance and policy group, and it was hard. But I think we all agreed directionally, as we did tonight, on moving forward with what's been put forth. I also just personally want to thank Sheila Ebel for her work. She's just, if you know Sheila, you love her. She's an amazing person and an asset to the district, and got caught up in that firestorm of the SEAB, but I want to thank her for her work there. And then the other thing we talked about was the Raptor policy, which obviously we'll continue to talk about, and I'll keep you guys abreast of what comes up, and what I'm sure we'll get some feedback, hopefully from the community tonight, but I'll let you guys know what happens. So, sorry for the long report, but that was pretty much what we covered.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We appreciate all the work you do and the whole committee, and we look forward to hearing what's next from the policy committee. Next, we have the Capital Projects Committee, and that is chaired by Mr. Cook.
Yeah, we met immediately following, based on, members are the same. Myself, trustee Mena, and trustee Smith are on the committee. We started talking about, some of the budget and where we stand with some of the items on the 2019 bond, like the land swap, which we approved to go through based on, due diligence being almost complete. And another thing we discussed was there was a field trip that some of us took to some of the activity centers that are around the area to get kind of a comparison on some of the services that they provide, how they're run, and the likes of that, so that we can help try to plan ours a little bit better to make it benefit the most students. We also talked about the where we stood with the 2019 bond, and with the inflation and what that was going to cause, and how we were going to try to rearrange a few things and look at things to complete what we need to complete in the 2019 bond, but potentially carrying some things over, out another year or two. We had a good discussion on creating a facilities and programming master plan. It's something that I kind of was hoping it started last year, but seems to be getting traction this year, but instead of looking at things individually, like the back end of the high school, or in one at one time, and then looking at the activity center at another time, and then looking at the pool another time, looking at the performing arts area, the pool area, the field house, the activity center, all as one big unit, along with the back of the school, and making a plan to look 5, 10, 15 years down the road. Like I said, in the committee meeting, we have a superintendent that claims he's gonna be here that long, and, you know, we'd like to see him carry that all out. But we had good discussion on that, and creating a plan that we can maybe not necessarily build the whole thing right now, but build two. We also talked a little bit about what was gonna happen with the sixth grade house and Roar, and kind of incorporating those into the master plan, because programming may be shifting around a little bit. Typically, this time of year, Plant Moran Crescent will come through with a bond presentation to the board, just an update on where we stand. And we're gonna hold off on that just a little bit, just to make sure that we can get things going. Other things we talked about, you know, the progress on the Meadows addition, the completion of the Village Oaks playgrounds, which should be complete now, the ribbon cutting ceremony. The high school east secure entryway, which was going through its final checklists and should be turned over hopefully soon.
Soon, yeah.
At one time I heard it was gonna be the end of September, no, a little bit
Yeah,
later,
it
but
is.
that's okay.
Delayed.
Talked about the, some of the scoreboards and stuff that have been installed and where they stand because of some issues, and working through those to get them functioning for events. And talked about the completion of the site improvement projects of the parking lots. A lot of them have been redone, and as my son says, they're nice places to get the dog to pull him on a skateboard now, nice and smooth. So, and then looked at some of the work to be done at the Roar Center and phase 2 for phase 2 and phase 2 at the high school. So, a lot of stuff talked about, a lot of bond dollars to make sure it goes to the right places.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Thanks for all your work. It sounds like it was a very, very busy Monday, so I appreciate you chairing that committee and the three of you participating with our administration, and as far as capital projects with Plant Moran Cressa and the team over there. So that being said, I think we are ready for a motion to adjourn. Nobody? Everybody
I'll
wants to
move that we
stay here all
adjourn.
night?
I'll move.
I'll support. Okay, recommended by Mr. Smith and supported by Mrs. Hood. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0.